desk before we even started, and Will has disappeared from the podcast for some
That's
reason.
okay. It's okay.
I should just reappear. I don't know why it's doing that. I'm still here. Yeah.
He's costumed as a ghost.
I guess so. All right, Kira, we got to start the show. All right, 3, 2. Hello, all, and welcome to the Movie Bears podcast. I'm Brad Harris, and I don't normally talk with a snarly voice like that, but this is episode 385 of the Movie Bears podcast. We are celebrating Halloween in the United States this weekend, so only apropos that we dress the part. If you were watching the video version of this podcast, there's some Halloween costume goodness coming your way. If you're listening to the digital version through Apple Podcasts, Spotify, what have you, you can't see the costumes while you listen, but maybe they'll show up on Facebook. We'll see. We've got a big show for you this week to help us celebrate the spooky holiday. We are going to be reviewing The Witches, the new adaptation of the Roald Dahl novel of the same name. I have a cattail on my face and I can't concentrate. Thanks, Kira.
Thanks, Hades.
Right, Hades. Exactly. Let's be on theme here. But I couldn't review The Witches from HBO, starring Anne Hathaway, Octavia Spencer, Stanley Tucci, Kristen Chenoweth, Chris Rock, and a whole lot more without my wonderful co-hosts. So please say hello to Jim Pugliafico, who's with us in the studio. Hey, sweetheart, how's it going?
It's going good. Thanks, babe. Just call me Rum Tum Tugger, or just Tugger for short, I guess. Would probably be more appropriate. But yeah, I'm looking forward to talking about The Witches with you guys tonight. This is our pseudo Halloween show, since it will be coming out the week of Halloween. So it's that time of year, believe it or not. Where has 2020 gone? That's a whole nother story.
We can say where it's gone. But I think that'd be, a whole nother, 12 episode series talking about that.
Anyway.
Well, welcome, Jim. Let's say hello to Will as well. How's it going, Will?
Hello, boys and ghouls. For our Halloween spooktacular. I want to do the whole episode in that voice, actually. It will not get annoying at all. This guy's
annoying already.
It's not annoying already. Guys, this is my favorite time of year. Spooky season is a whole thing here at the house. Most people set up like their Christmas village. We have a Halloween village on the shelf. And even though we've been celebrating spooky season for the past several weeks, this is it, right? Like, this is the big show. This is the last episode that we're going to record before Halloween. The last episode we're going to record before some other major things happen in the United States. So I'm pumped. I'm excited. And I think the one that we've got on deck tonight, good, bad, or whatever, is very much on theme.
That's for sure.
Indeed. Most definitely. And you weren't kidding. Big stuff coming up next week. I both can't wait and I'm terrified. So it seems appropriate that it's happening so soon after Halloween.
You are the Dark Lord of the Underworld. You cannot be terrified.
Oh, right. Make next week happen appropriately, or you will feel my fiery wrath.
I'll drag the world to hell.
Drag the world to hell? Like, we're not already there?
Wait, what? I thought hell was... Okay, anyway. By the way, I'm a kinky devil.
Oh, it's kinky devil?
I don't know. It's a devil.
You're like... You feel like you could be sort of like chilling in the background of Eyes Wide Shut.
That's probably true. Oh, look, an orgy. Let me take my mask over there. It would work, right?
It would work. It would work.
Yeah. Yeah. But then Tom Cruise is rubbing up on you and Nicole Kidman is watching and it just gets awkward.
It becomes a thing, a whole thing. Yeah. You know what? Skip that. Let's just do a review. You know,
I think that's a little better, a little more my speed. Perhaps. Well, Jim, Will,
Mhm.
are you ready to talk The Witches?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
All right.
Are you
Awesome.
ready?
Well, I'm also ready to talk The Witches. How many times can we say The Witches on this The Witches themed podcast?
Yeah, if only we were getting paid every time we said it, right?
If this were a drinking game, our audience would be dead.
Indeed. Well, drink your potion responsibly. Here we go. Our review of The Witches. All right. So, Jim, do us a favor.
Sure.
Give us a little bit of a brief setup of this one and your personal thoughts. I mean, was this worth devoting a couple hours on HBO Max? Would you skip this one? How did you feel?
That's a lot of pressure right there. I don't know if I can answer that question.
Do it.
I guess I could answer it for myself only. So we're talking about The Witches. This is an adaptation of the Roald Dahl novel. I don't know what year that came out. I'm not familiar with the novel. I'm not familiar with the original movie property, but maybe you guys are, and maybe can comment on that. This one is, let me read the synopsis, and then we'll get into kind of what's behind this making of this movie. This one, surprisingly, is directed by Robert Zemeckis, which is interesting because we just spent the last couple of days watching the Back to the Future series.
Bum, bum, bum,
Yeah, so it was interesting as I was watching this movie, especially toward the end, and we'll get into that. I'm like, could this be? I didn't know going in. I said, could this be a Zemeckis movie or influenced by Zemeckis? And then, sure enough, boom, he's a director and one of the writers. Also involved in the writing of the screenplay was Guillermo del Toro, none other than GDT himself. And some of that does show in this film, which we'll talk about as well. This one stars Anne Hathaway, Octavia Spencer, Stanley Tucci, and a lot of people involved in the cast of this one. Kristen Chenoweth, Chris Rock is involved in this one. So a lot of surprises pop up in this movie, especially if you don't know a lot about it, like I was going in. I'll just read the synopsis and then I'll give you my impressions. A young boy and his grandmother have a run-in with a coven of witches and their leader. So that's what we get off of IMDb. Yeah, this one is about this kind of band of witches, as the title would say, that have an appetite and a distinct dislike for children. And I know what you're all thinking, right?
Oh.
Like, this is a movie right up my alley. And to some degree, it might seem that way. And I did, but I don't know if I did kind of identify with any of these witches or not. But yeah, and the grandmother is played by Octavia Spencer, and the head witch is played by Anne Hathaway, chewing up scenery in the role of the head witch. And I don't even remember her name, but we'll get into that a little bit. Hey, this movie, as I was watching it, I'm like, this movie would be great for kids. It's got some really, I thought, genuinely disturbing, scary stuff in it. Without going into like the gore side of things, really. It has some kind of body, I don't know what you call it, like
Horror?
Metamorphosis kind of stuff going on. That it's a little frightening. Some of the creatures, and we'll get into spoilers later, but some of the creatures in here I thought were well done, and the tension, I liked it. Some of the stuff reminded me of other lesser movies like Mouse Hunt. Do you guys remember Mouse Hunt from like 90s, late 90s?
I remember Mouse
yeah.
Hunt. Yeah.
Mouse
Yep.
Hunt. There's a lot of Mouse Hunt kind of bones in this movie, especially in the middle section of the movie where mouses appear.
Mice.
Overall, I think I really mice. mice. I think I appreciated this film. Both as a kids movie and as an adult, I like some sections of this movie. I wasn't really into everything that happened, but there were some things that I was genuinely like, okay, that's pretty cool. Like I said, Anne Hathaway was giving her all into this role, and that was fun to see her kind of really hamming it up and chewing up scenery. That was kind of fun, as well as every time Stanley Tucci's on the screen, even though he's got a lesser role in this film, I really dug his character and what he brought to that character. I also like some of the special effects in this movie. I mean, for kind of the film that it is, I think the special effects look really, really good to me. Like this is a mixture of CGI and live action. But yeah, I'm going to give this a middle of the road review. This is like a lukewarm like for me. But there is some stuff in here that I really, really loved. So I will say this, and this may be blasphemy, but I think I enjoyed this movie a touch more than Hocus Pocus. So there you go.
Ooh.
Is this your new Halloween classic?
I don't know if it's not a Halloween classic, but it's I could see some kid really getting into this movie and it becoming a Halloween classic for some kid growing up today.
All right. Well, Jim, thank you for sharing your thoughts. We've got some folks hanging out with us in the live chat, by the way, that have been chatting a little bit while we've been chatting. Jordan Riley is here. Hey, Jordan. Good to see you. He says, hey, Bears. Hey, Jordan.
Mm-hmm.
Hey,
Always
Jordan.
a pleasure to see you.
Hey, Jordan.
Turn up. Hamstrack. Tammy's here. He says, y'all look spooky with like 20 O's. I love all the O's. And Jim, to your point, Mary K. Meadows. Mary, oh my gosh, always good to see you. She says, yes, this movie is great for kids. Parker loves both versions. So both the 90s version as well as this new one. Mary, I'm curious if Parker has a preference. You'll have to let us know in the chat. That seems like maybe an unfair question. I don't know how you make people that young choose, but curious. Jeff Tyndale. Hey, Jeff. He says, hey, guys.
Hey, Jeff.
Welcome. Glad to see you, too. We should probably say this movie is a beloved favorite of many, many people, I think is evidenced by how many folks in the live chat right now. We may not be able to keep up with all of the comments, but just know we're keeping an eye out, and we love you all. Welcome. Glad to have you with us. Will, what did you think of this one? Because if I remember right, you were a big fan of the first movie. Did that maybe hold you back? Were you able to see it as its own separate thing? What was this like for you?
So it's interesting. This, first of all, I think it's important to couch all of this in the fact that we are a bunch of dudes in our late 30s and up, we're not 100% the target audience for that. And everything that we sort of say in terms of this is to be said a little bit with a grain of salt. The target audience for this is going to have a very different reaction. And I know, I was talking a little bit with Mary kind of between all of this. And when she found out and Parker found out that this is what we were going to do for the episode, Parker put on his film critic hat and watched both of them. She was telling me he watched both of them so that he could compare the differences, so that he would know like what they changed, what they didn't, which I absolutely adore. That is like, that's the same type of level of like, I got to dig into this film that I appreciate. So good job, Parker.
Get that young man a film festival badge right now.
Ooh, I like that. And so for me, Brad, when I think back on the original, the one from 1990, the Nicholas Roeg version, it was one of those films that I don't know that it was necessarily like one that I watched like on repeat or anything like that. This was a film that always happened to come on sick days for me, just sort of randomly. So my memories of this film growing up were very much like tinted by as a fever dream, and that did impact my viewing experience, because I had to go back and rewatch it just sort of like lucidly to go like, what even happened in that one? So this new film is definitely an adaptation, not just of the book, but also of the 1990 film version. There are a lot of shots and scenes and the way things that are are shot, like I think about the way the ballroom looked, that feel as though they are direct references to the way they appeared in the original film. The issue I run into with the new version of it, I'm with Jim. I think that it's perfectly I think it's perfectly enjoyable. I think it'll be fun for kids. I think there's definitely some fun moments in there, and I do love some of the body horror stuff that was genuinely unsettling, especially the noises that
Thank you,
body horror
GDT.
made. Oh my gosh. But what I don't think worked as well for me is just going back to the original one. It felt like it had a little bit more like charm and spark for me personally. And I think part of that is because a little bit more of it was done practically. And I'm always like, give me the practical, give me do what you can, in camera as much as possible. Robert Zemeckis is one of those filmmakers who embraces technology. That's sort of been his calling card. Like you can think all the way back to, Who Framed Roger Rabbit with the, animation and live action. He goes through a couple of the Back to the Future films, of course, but you have a few films that he directs there where he's really trying out Christmas Carol and there's another Polar Express where he's doing CGI and motion capture, and he really, really enjoys how can I play around with new technology. And I think we see a lot of that here. I think he sort of lost some of the charm in embracing that technology here. I think that part of it comes from the fact that it feels as though everyone's giving really fun performances, but it felt kind of like everyone was giving fun performances in very different films. I love what Octavia Spencer does in this movie. I love what Stanley Tucci does in this movie. And to a very, very different degree, I love what Anne Hathaway did in this movie. But I don't know that I love what both Anne Hathaway and Octavia Spencer did in this same movie. It felt very like flipping a switch into Silly Town and then kind of bringing it back to something really grounded and then kind of going back over the top again. That said, some of the updates that they did make, I think, make it a little bit more accessible. The story is shifted to the United States. We have a very diverse cast in this, which wasn't the case in the 1990s one. Both with the leads as well as even some of the background witches and stuff. We get to see a lot of just different people, and I like that. It's an easy thing to do, and more films need to do it. I mean, this is a perfectly fine little movie to watch with your family. I would recommend also, if you haven't watched it, check out the 1990 one. I do like it more, and again, I think it just feels like it's a little bit more focused in what it's doing, and the practical effects really are feel like they are pushing the limits of the technology, maybe even more than all the CGI and whatever stuff does in this one. So not a pass, not a but not a a recommend. I think this is one that just if you're looking, what this one is, take a sick day, get a bowl of chicken noodle soup, and then watch this one and have that fever dream experience, because I think to me that's the only way to experience the witches.
Can I swap out the chicken noodle soup for chicken ramen?
You absolutely can. And I don't even know why I say chicken noodle soup. I don't even eat chicken noodle soup anymore, but that's the six.
Chicken children noodle soup.
Children noodle soup.
Chicken children soup. Say that to them. All right.
What's in the soup, boys and girls? No, that's what's in the soup.
We've got two mild reactions. I'll give you my thoughts here in a second, but we actually have a question from Andrew Thomas in the chat who says, was this originally destined for theatrical release? Andrew, we have answers for you, my friend. It was originally scheduled for a theatrical release this month. Warner Brothers decided to yank it from the calendar all the way back in the month of June and slate it for release on the HBO Max platform. So I'm curious, Jim, Will, just briefly, because I know we want to get to spoilers here in a second.
I want to hear what you thought. Yeah.
Sure. Would your experience have been different though? Just quick question. If you'd seen this in a theater with popcorn and like kids screaming and um would that have enhanced your viewing?
Enhanced, no. I don't know if it would have changed all that much, to be honest. Um, like I said, it was just a fun. It was a fun movie. I would have liked to have seen what a an age diverse audience would have thought of this movie, kind of, in a setting like we used to have in movie theaters. Remember those days when we used to have movies? Like with people. It would have been fun to see like if kids react to this movie. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's definitely the case. Although I will say, for me personally, I think this was probably a pretty optimal experience in terms of it because, since this premiered on a streaming service that I'm already paying for, it didn't cost me any extra. I was able to watch it on my own time. I ended up watching it in the morning because it felt like the time to watch it. Like it felt like just kind of wake up, grab a bowl of cereal, and kind of like watch this family film. And all of that worked pretty well for it, grand scheme of things. If I had paid, like $20 for tickets and all of that, I think that it would have, I don't know, just the financial impact of it. I can't say that I would have been able to have like completely divorced myself of that.
All right. Well, that's fair. Breaking news in the chat. Mary K. Meadows with the Parker Report. Apparently, Parker took notes, and after much movie critic deliberation, there is a clear frontrunner between the original film and this one for Parker. And it appears Parker prefers the original. He likes the mice better in the original. And
Get it, Parker?
Apparently thought Anne Hathaway's accent was really weird in this movie. So,
very
Parker,
weird.
much wisdom coming from you, our newfound friend, because I completely agree. I found the Anne Hathaway accent really distracting. Like all the kooky, like spooky stuff they did with her character and the CGI like body horror stuff and the really like weird like mouth with the teeth. Like looking at the character, spooky as all get out, gave me the creeps. But then she started talking like this all the time. I was just like, okay, you're not scary at all. So I would have to agree. I think the original kind of bumps this one out by quite a bit for me. That said, though, I enjoyed myself with this film. I actually really, really loved Octavia Spencer in this. I know Octavia Spencer is kind of Octavia Spencer in pretty much everything, but like I'm okay with that. Like I'm here for it. She was wonderful in this role, and she reminded me of a woman that I knew when I was growing up. She was a good friend of the family, and I didn't lose my parents and have to grow up with her. But like every time I went over to her house or she would babysit, she would put on some like Motown records and we would dance and she'd make me peanut butter and banana sandwiches. And she was just an amazing person. And now I'm wondering whatever happened to her. And I feel bad that I don't know. Wow, way to bring yourself down, Brad. But I was getting a lot of vibes from her in this film. So Octavia Spencer, like, thank you for taking me back to my childhood. Thank you for being amazing in this film. Stanley Tucci in this. I didn't know he was part of this project. I kind of love him and everything he's in. I'll say he was pretty milquetoast here, but I don't think that's Stanley Tucci's fault as much as it is as the hotel manager just doesn't have a lot to do in this movie. It's not like he can be like the Hunger Games and like do all this like cool crazy stuff. I mean, he's a hotel manager. Like it's a little limited there. But I think that Chris Rock had about the perfect amount of Chris Rock in this film. A little of him goes a really long way for me. But it was great to see him turn up. The biggest delight for me, though, in terms of surprise, was Kristen Chenoweth. Jim and I did not know that she was in the film. And we heard the mouse, Daisy, speak. And we we're like, oh my God, no, that can't be. Is that? It is Galinda with a G in this film. So great to see her pop up. So a lot of fun, some crazy hijinks. I have to say, I too prefer the original practical effects from the first film. They did some really great things that I don't even know how they pulled off in that movie. And while the CGI wasn't like terrible here, in fact, they did some really neat things. Maybe we'll talk about some of it in spoilers. It just, I don't know. I know a lot of work goes into CGI. We have friends who are
Right.
CGI artists, so I don't want to discount what they do, but sometimes CGI feels a little bit lazy compared to practical effects, right? It looks less real, but like more fantastical.
It,
So it's this weird balance, thing that I don't always, I don't know, appreciate as much as probably some folks do. But I loved some of the things that they were going for with those effects, even if I did miss the practical side. So I'd say this is definitely a recommend for me, especially during Halloween season right now. I don't know this is one I'm going to return to and like watch every year or anything. But I will just say, final thought, spoiler free. I didn't hate the kids, and that's a big boon for me.
Yep.
I think that's a really good point. Like, I think the child actors in this do a pretty darn good job, because if you think about it, and this is true of the original, and we'll talk about why here in a moment, although it's kind of what the movie is. The child actors have to wear two hats, right? They have to be screen actors, and to a degree they have to be voice actors as well, and those are two very different talents, right? And there are some great adults who are great at one and great at the other, and the fact that these kids are able to kind of step up and do both and do a pretty decent job of it, I think that's a feather in both of their caps.
Yeah, and I didn't. I was thinking like, I didn't dislike the child actors in here either. Although we're gonna get into some stuff in spoilers. There were some story things they did in here, which it kind of made me cringe a lot of the way through the movie, especially with one of the kid characters. Kind of that lazy joke stuff that really bothers me in a movie like this. But yeah, I thought for the most part they did a really good job, and like you said, we get to see them as live actors. Well, at least we only get to see one of them for a substantial amount of time as a live actor,
Right.
In the movie. The other one of them not at all, and then one of them for a pretty short time. So yeah, I thought the kid actors were fine. Like I said, I love what I love about the Stanley Tucci character is kind of just the subtle ways he was trying to deal with this woman that he had to deal with, and trying to get her to, kind of playing that hotel manager role. Like he's got to satisfy the customer, even when the customer is like total batshit crazy. And I just love the way he played with that. I also love the way they played a little bit with the accent. We talked about the accent that Anne Hathaway has as the main witch in this, which was so over the top. I mean, you talked about the guy from the Hunger Games, right? Well, Stanley Tucci was the over the top guy. In this movie, he's kind of the more sedate, normal kind of guy, and Anne Hathaway is like the way over the top character. But they even kind of played a little bit with that. Like there was a part, and this is not really a spoiler. There's a part where she's saying something and it's not being understood because of the weird accent that she's putting on the word. And they play that up as a joke, which I thought worked pretty well. And we'll get to it a little more in spoilers as to what it is.
So you're not alone. Chris Lopez, sexy voice of the Movie Bears podcast.
Yeah.
Chris, we love and miss you. Come back soon. Hope you and Jason are doing well. Chris says, I had a blast watching this with friends. It was a fun romp, and that's all I was expecting. Hathaway's accent was hilarious. So it may not work for everybody, but I think a lot of folks were totally digging it. And that's kind of awesome.
Gotta let it happen, man. Let it happen.
And I don't disagree with the voice. I think that Anne Hathaway, this was definitely a swing for the fences performance, right? Like this is, when you're doing when you're doing like a stage play, they always say like you kind of act to the back row, and Anne Hathaway was like acting to like the people in the parking lot. Like, you know, she chewed every bit of scenery, every gesture was over the top, every syllable was just completely drawn out into this very bizarre thing. And I kind of liked it. What I don't know that I necessarily liked about it is that it felt like she was the only one in the movie that was playing that madcap. I think that this is a crazy good performance in a very different version of this film. It's almost like I don't know what was going on with Zemeckis. You don't know unless you're actually like working on set of something like that. You can only surmise from the final product, but it almost feels to me like he sort of let his actors sort of do their thing and was focused a lot more on kind of like, you know, how the technology would tell the story, which again is sort of like what Zemeckis is sort of like really into these days.
That's a fair point. Well, I think it's getting increasingly more difficult to talk around this movie instead of talk through it. Jim, Will, how do you feel about maybe moving things on to spoiler territory?
You know, I think we can take 3 drops of our magic potion and let this podcast transform.
Jim can't answer because he's busy bathing himself.
Oh no, he's been turned into a cat.
All right. Well, give us 2 paw licks for yes, 1 paw lick for no, if you're ready for spoilers. All right, we got 2. We're ready to go.
That's
all right.
By the way, that's good podcasting right there.
That is right. That's excellent audio. That'll make for great. That'll make for great in the edit.
All right. Well, we're gonna go ahead and move things along to spoilers. If you have not yet seen The Witches on HBO Max yet, and you value your innocence where the plot is concerned, you value not knowing things about this movie, now is your time to step away for maybe 20-ish minutes, then come on back at the end for some plugs. We may have some things to put on your radar you might enjoy checking out between now and our next recording. Or if you're listening to the magic of digital tape delay, you can use the handy dandy time index in the show notes through Apple Music, Spotify, Stitcher, however you access your podcast, jump ahead as appropriate. All that said, awkward rambling complete. Spoilers are fair game. Where do you guys want to start?
I'll start. I knew I was in for at least some thrills in this movie pretty early on. There's a scene where our first run-in with the witches, kind of a flashback, right? Octavia Spencer's telling the story about her friend who was like snatched away by a witch on the promise of a candy bar and turned into a chicken. And I thought that was horrifying. Like that, to me, that was like I don't know if it was supposed to be played for comedy, but to watch a child turn into a chicken in front of her family, it was kind of horrifying. I was actually expecting the movie to cut to the next scene with the big chicken on the table and them all sitting around the table. Like, I was almost expecting it. Is this movie going to go there? Is it? No, it didn't really go there. But in a different version of this movie, I think that would have been the way to cut it and have the dad there slicing into it, with a knife. But yeah, there were all kinds of flourishes in this movie like that I thought kind of elevated it above just, being a totally like run-of-the-mill boring, CGI fest. I thought there was some really good stuff buried in here.
I think that was 100% one of those pieces. We were talking about the Hathaway performance and how it feels like it's in a different movie, but there are these little glimpses of some of those other elements. Like you mentioned, the chicken transformation is buck wild and 100% worked in sort of that story. The other thing, I loved the dresses in this. They did some sort of like CG magic to the dresses themselves for the different witches, where at least 2 major occasions we saw a snake sort of built into the dress itself. The one sort of like the bands and stuff coming out is the snake in the sort of like the convenience store, and then Anne Hathaway is with that. I didn't even notice it at first. It just had this like one long kind of flourish on the edge going around. And then as she starts sort of like going into witchy mode, you see that it's a snake. That was really cool. Like whoever it was that did the the character design for this, whoever it was that kind of busted out the pen and paper and said, I want to put a snake here. I want to put a snake here. That person is a hero, because those were absolutely wonderful scenes. I wanted to see more of that. I feel like we lost a little bit of that once we get to kind of like the mouse hunt scene.
Right. Yeah.
I feel like the movie sort of dipped a little bit for me there. The mice just didn't. The mice didn't look as cool as some of the other cool effects did. But those dresses were pretty wonderful.
Yeah.
Speaking of clothing causing a reaction, I just had to take my mask off because there is a very freaked out tuxedo cat in my immediate area who saw my mask, and she's just fluffed up, huger than I've ever seen her. Poe, it's okay. It's a mask. It can't hurt you. We have a new kitten in the house, as anyone who follows on Facebook is probably aware. And our previously youngest cat is just freaked out like you wouldn't believe. So every little thing is setting her off. So I'm gonna keep my devil mask off for a few minutes, so she doesn't get freaked out. But I got freaked out.
Devil angel.
I got freaked out by the snake on Anne Hathaway's dress, because I noticed that the snake shoulder clasp was there, but I didn't realize that thing was like moving and like slithering like on the ground as she walked at first. And we had to pause this movie and come back because I was up really early yesterday and I hit a wall, and like 40 minutes into the movie, I was just conked out. And normally Jim's the one who conks out. I love you, babe. But it
Not
was me
this time.
And Jim was like, hey,
spill the tea.
Hey, he's like, let's finish it tomorrow, which is usually my line. And I was like, all right, yeah, let's finish it. So we finished watching it today, and we kind of rewound it a few minutes. That's why this is relevant. And that's when I noticed that the snake was actually like moving and slithering on the ground. And that's what I mean, like with the CGI stuff here. That was a really great CGI touch. Loved that. Like subtle CGI, all for it. Great. But the overt CGI stuff, like for instance, when the snake comes off the witch's arm in the convenience store, that just looked really weird and fake and like not great for me. So it's almost like there's like a balance with the CGI for some people. And this movie kind of crosses it at some points. The Anne Hathaway character, she has these arms that are like as they like come at you. And at first it's like, ooh, that's creepy. That's spooky. But then it gets like really cartoony as they're like, just going all over the place. So I don't know. Did it feel that way for anybody else?
Yeah, it did with the arms, like in the kind of the vent crawl space thing. Loved the sound. I think I mentioned that in the pre-spoilers. That sound design was amazing. And the idea of that's original. That was not in the original film, and was definitely a creation for this. But there was definitely something, whether it be kind of like the light occlusion, maybe it's something with like either the way that the light reflected off of the skin, it had a very plasticky look. It didn't have those like natural skin has this like thing, like when light hits it, it's not just the same color all across. There's like a little like this like bright line, like kind of right as the light hits the skin as it's going away. It's like a very fine touch that our eyes just sort of like look at and like internalize and say that's what skin does. And when you don't see that, when it looks a little flat and it doesn't have those textures, the eye just says, wait, there's something off here. That's why when you look at video game cutscenes, they can look very real, but a lot of times they don't look photorealistic because they're still that far off from the uncanny valley. That's what I got here. They could have done something a little different here, I think, with the way that was designed.
I also, there's a question in the comments. I hope you guys can grab it from Tim Turnbow. who asked, and this was earlier during our non-spoiler talk, which is why I didn't bring it up because I think it's kind of spoilery. Octavia's character as the grandmother was sick most of the time in the movie, and did they not resolve that? To me, it seemed to be a little bit underrepresented. I think it was kind of always there, but in terms of how it was there, why it was there, and did it get resolved, I thought that was, I guess, not well told.
Right.
At least for me, I don't. It seems to me that her sickness came on with the appearance of the witch, right? With the appearance of the witches somehow, and I don't know if there was a direct connection there. Maybe I missed it. Maybe one of you guys saw it. And then at the end, I don't even think they addressed it as far as it going away or not. Because obviously, as we see in the end credit sequence, she lives a pretty, she lives much longer in order to hunt down witches.
At least 9 years.
Yeah.
We'll get to that.
I think there's a scene where they're like on the bed in the hotel room before the kid becomes a mouse, and he, is just like, you're sick. Like, why are you sick? And she's like, oh, the witch, made me sick. So I think that confirms it. And I think I just assumed when she was alive way after that, like with the destruction of all the witches, that whatever was causing her magical ailment went away. But like a line of dialogue, I think could have easily fixed that rather than leaving it up in the air. So I think that's a very valid question and thing to call out.
It's a plot point that I don't think really added anything, nor did it go anywhere. Right.
Yeah.
It just was a thing that was brought up. And the reason it was brought up, in the original, the grandmother, one of the she has like diabetes, and it becomes like a plot point, a couple of times, even though not a major one, but they reference it, just like, grandma, you can't have sweet cakes and sweet creams. She's like, oh, just a little bit. When it became like sort of like just, I don't know, just like a thing that they knew how to live with and they knew how to work with. Here, it seems like they tried to adapt that and make it a little bit more tied to the witches, but then they didn't have a place to take it. I would have cut that entirely. Like, I don't know that it influenced any motivations, nor did it influence any plot points.
I kept waiting for it to become a more of a plot point. Like she was really sick, and maybe she was like, fading, or her health was really fading, and the kids as mice had to do something quicker, something. But we didn't get any of that. What was going on in Grandma's kitchen? Like they did some cool things with color palettes in this movie. I think if you really notice, like everything in the grandmother's kitchen was golden, yellow, like sun-baked, like pure. Even the food she served the kid cornbread with orange juice. Like who serves cornbread and orange juice together?
I'll tell you what was going on in that kitchen. That was Brad's dream kitchen colors. That's what was going on. I'm a huge fan of buttercream yellow in a kitchen. So that was delightful. Not so much of a fan of orange juice and cornbread together, but the color palette, on board.
She had that yellow telephone that was hanging on the wall. I kept looking at it. I'm like, where did they get that prop? That's an amazing telephone. I was like,
I think we just saw that telephone in Boys in the Band.
Possibly.
Yeah. So here's a thing that I didn't like, and this one hurts my soul to say, guys, because I love me some Kristen Chenoweth. I love me some Kristen Chenoweth. And pretty much when she pops up in something, like those actors and actresses who they show up in a thing and you immediately go like, oh, she's in this. And you're automatically like brought in a little bit. But I really didn't like her character, kind of what they had going on with her in this one. So Daisy is the mouse, and you find out that she was actually a little girl named Mary who got turned. Okay, yeah. Oh, okay, good, Chris. My question is about Daisy. Why didn't they call her Mary after learning her real name? Because she was kind of tacked on. Because she didn't really have much to do aside from just being another character being there in the hijinks. I didn't really know anything about her character, what her motivations for, what she wanted. I just know that she was the mouse, and now she can talk, and now she's helping the boy, and that was kind of it. I could have used something else, but realistically, I think you can cut that character entirely and just sort of stick with the two, was Luke and Bruno, and I think we have I think it's better if we cut Kristen Chenoweth.
I think it would have been interesting if, like, instead of the Mary character being another kid who was turned into a mouse and lived, a really long life, if she was just Daisy the mouse who they could suddenly understand because they were mice. Right? Like, the little boy has this relationship with Daisy. He's teaching her tricks. He builds these cool, like, things for her to play on. He obviously cares about her a lot. It would have been really neat to explore that relationship, maybe mouse to mouse, not in like a romantic way, but like oh my God, you're a mouse now too. You can finally understand me. Could have been neat.
Yeah.
But
we have a good question from. Oh, go ahead. Go ahead, Jim.
Go with the question
I was
first.
going to say, we got a question from Ryan that I think speaks to part of the issue with the Kristen Chenoweth character. Ryan says she was turned into a mouse only weeks or months before, but talked like an adult. So were adults being turned into mice as well? It was confusing, and that does become a bit of a sticky plot point. I was able to sort of like after the fact piece it together, and but it was not very well spelled out. And again, this is a movie for kids. I don't know that they're necessarily going to be picking up on this very quickly. Like the fact that mice age quicker, and therefore, 9 years later, when Octavia is a grandmother, now the little boy is like an old man mouse. That means that in the 4 months or so that Daisy has been a mouse, she's at least grown up from being like a little kid to a somewhat adult, old enough to be voiced by Kristen Chenoweth. That part was not super clear in the movie. I had to sort of do some like napkin math afterwards, and honestly, that is all just like pulling that right out of my what to try to come up with that solution. But that character is very tacked on. I do like the idea of what if Daisy's just a mouse. That again, going back to the original, and I hate doing this and being but the original guy, but the original, like they go and they find William and Mary down in the crawl space afterwards, and they're just his pet mice, and they're just actual mice, and they squeak at him a couple of times and they go past. That's sort of it. They were a plot point to get him like playing kind of behind the behind the stage and set things up.
And I give this movie a little bit of credit for maybe not the movie, it's the credit, but it's the story credit. If they made a new property today similar to this, the kids get transformed into mice, by the end of the movie they're going to get transformed back into kids, right? They're gonna totally undo that with some kind of weird magic bullshit, right? In this movie, these kids get turned into mice. They have to live the rest of their life as mice. And they kind of come to terms with it with lines like, oh, it's not so bad being a mouse. I don't have to go to school, and, blah, blah, blah. I like cheese or whatever, but it's kind of profoundly weird and sad when you think about it. One kid lost his parents because every kid in this movie pretty much lost their parents, right? We know Daisy said she lost her parents. The main character, I don't even know if he had a name, lost his parents in a terrible car accident when he was still a boy. And Bruno loses his parents in front of his eyes because they can't deal with the fact that he's now a mouse, obviously. So think about that. Think about how fucked up that is, that this movie puts that out there.
It's interesting because, like, for me growing up, one of the things I loved about the Roald Dahl books is that, like, the endings aren't exactly the happiest of endings. Like James and the Giant Peach, this amazing magical peach, fucking, excuse my language, kids watching, rots, right? Like, this peach isn't this amazing magical thing anymore. Matilda gets these amazing powers, but like, she's still kind of an unhappy girl in a not great situation by the end of the book. Same thing here. The kids are still mice. So I think it's cool that, like, there's this message of find your bliss where you are instead of like somewhere else that may not be a thing. I wish more movies would do that, actually.
I agree with you 100%.
I agree, and I think that one of the things I appreciate about this movie is that it's dark. This is a dark ending, like at least for me, right? So okay,
Yeah.
so let's contextualize this. At the end of the movie, there's like this line where you know, Grandma, how long do mice live? Well, mice tend to live
3
about
years.
3 years, but since you're a mouse boy, you might live three
A
times as long as
a
that.
little longer.
Right.
So this is a
Right.
kid who's got like he probably had let's say really optimistically, he probably had another maybe 70 years ahead of him. Now he's got 9 before kind of like he's at the end of his life. Let's cut to that the framing device, right? Like they're training the kids to go off and get the witches, right? We see Octavia Spencer, she's older now. So, but she was already meant to be a grandmother and older. So we're looking at, like maybe a decade later, right? And the little boy Luke is now an old man mouse. And they got to be kind of like live out their old days together. Never mind the fact that, again, this is like a little boy who's had like the majority of his years taken away from him. But you know who was not there? The other 2 mice who we knew were
Right.
living with them.
Older.
And because the Kristen Chenoweth character, she was a little bit older, she would have died by the end of that. And the Bruno character probably made less good, like at least within the movie's fiction, health decisions than Luke, and probably didn't make it as long. So we have these kids who just sort of like died. And granted, kids die. That's a thing, and there is something to be said about like accepting things as they are and sort of living life as it comes, and making the best of the time we got here. But this movie's dark, and I kind of appreciate it, but it is also like super weird that this happened, right?
So like, yeah, it could have been way darker. I think the part of the movie we didn't see. I think the end was all a dream. That Octavia Spencer was dreaming from prison when she got home from the hotel, and her grandson was nowhere to be found, and the police showed up and they couldn't find him. They thought that she killed him, and she went to jail for it. And she maybe was just dreaming of a happier life.
So you're telling me that the woman that goes to the hotel, where a bunch of like prominent, affluent women are at before being like murdered, a bunch of them, a whole society of them, who then has a mysterious trunk of money delivered to her house, and her kid's now missing. You're telling me that she's a little bit sus?
I mean, what can I say? Buttercream yellow is sus.
That would be like super, like that would be like the line too far. Like if like that shot, if the next shot was like the exact same thing, but also she's behind bars, that would be like that'd be too dark for me. Like this was a cute version of dark. Like I do appreciate like they had the ability. This is a world where magic exists. You can just magic a solution out of it. You want the kids to be kids again, magic happens. And that's what happened in the original. Another witch just decides to show up and say,
really?
You know
Is that what happens?
Spoilers for the original.
That's okay. It's all right. It's okay.
Yeah. There's one witch who kind of survived all of that in the original, and they're just like, and then she comes to their house at the end where they've kind of made peace with everything that's going to happen, but it's still like, within a few days, like it's kind of recently happened, and she's outside the window and she turns them back and magics the 2 like mice that got lost back into their cages, and the little boy's outside the window saying, "Don't forget to go change Bruno too." And it's it's a more magical upbeat ending.
Well, then I give this movie even more credit then for the ending that we got, because I thought it was it's great. It definitely subverted my expectations. Like, oh, I know where this movie is going. The kids are going to get changed back, and everything's going to be happily ever after. But that's not exactly the way it went.
Well, she starts making the magic potion, and then they all hold hands and like pray over it. And I was like, oh, here we go, turning the kids back. But wait, what about the soup? So yeah, I agree. Definitely good thing there. Jim, you had mentioned something to me about the Bruno kid character.
Oh boy, yeah.
Offline. I don't know if you want to talk about that at all.
Well, I don't know. It's it's a very tired, sad, eye-rolly trope in movies that they'll take like an overweight kid or an overweight character and use them primarily, just like in this movie, as he's another kid character and he's one of the ensemble of mice, but he is used for the butt of fat jokes and overeating jokes almost throughout the entire movie. And I'm like, where is this coming from? You mean to tell me that with the screenwriters that we've got, like Zemeckis and Guillermo del Toro and such, working on a modern take on this movie, they couldn't have not like done that, or at least maybe thrown something in a smart way in there to kind of subvert that? I just don't get it. That was the one thing that really kind of pissed me off, because I figured, okay, they're going to do it once. Thankfully, they got that shit out of the way. But no, they kept like hitting that thing over and over and over right up through the end of the movie. It was kind of cringy to see that.
Yeah, and the air quotes reason why they did it was because that was the way it was in the original, and I think they just moved that character over more or less as is, give or take a few things. But you're right. Like, there's a thing with character writing, coding, where you basically can apply a quick archetype on top of someone and someone will get it. You put glasses on someone and then you can say that they're the nerdy character and they like nerd things. Or, if like you give someone, just like, oh, now they're wearing a jersey. Oh, cool. They're the athletic one and they're doing jump ones. And unfortunately, the fat one has become like one of those same codes, and we get those archetypal actions. We know that they're going to be gluttonous and lazy, and they're going to have problems getting through things, and they're going to get stuck. And Chris Lopez says, how many times did he have to get stuck moving through something? And absolutely, like, yeah, the answer is 1,000. I think you can still do stuff like that. You can still, like, body types are different, and sometimes body types are advantageous or disadvantageous to a situation, and sometimes gluttonous behavior is funny. You can do a lot of that if you give the character more things to do beyond that. You can have a character who likes food quite a bit, but give them also something else. This character was almost gluttonous to the point of stupidity a lot of times. There were a lot of situations where he would just be like, oh, I'm about to get decapitated. I'm gonna stop and eat this banana first. Like it was just always like just too much. It was always just like to the point of parody. And again, it doesn't take much to change that. You can still have that character appear if you want to be true to the story in the original. You just have to add a few additional things on top of him so that that's not his only thing.
Just give him his one Hodor moment.
Newsflash, you can be fat and not constantly eat all the time and get stuck going through things. Just saying.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Or at least give the character his moment, his Hodor moment. You know what I mean? Where he uses his size to his advantage at one point. I don't think we got that in this movie ever. So anyway, that was just a pet peeve of mine. Kind of lazy coding. Pet peeve.
Well, gentlemen, any final thoughts as we look to wrap this up and actually head into some plugs?
Only other thing I've got, and I kind of hit on it before, but the other person I would have cut from this cast would have been Chris Rock, only because he has such a distinct voice that carries like when you hear Chris Rock talk, you immediately picture Chris Rock. You know who Chris Rock is. You know what he does. And so when he starts your movie doing your framing device narration, it actually kind of takes you out of the magic of the story. Like, you kind of have to get past the Chris Rock stuff until you're able to like kind of settle into the movie. Like, and granted, he's only telling like a short little framing device thing. It's not super big, but at the same time, it was super distracting.
Yeah. I don't know. I didn't need that I don't know, that kind of shtick that he does in that voiceover. The voiceover narration, I don't have a problem on the surface a voiceover narration most of the time if it's done well.
Oh yeah, yeah.
But this was just so, like, obviously he's trying to be goofy, and I didn't see that in the character at all. Imagine if they had flipped that around and used somebody like with a really deep, like earnest voice, like, you know, a Sterling K. Brown, Morgan Freeman's, even Sterling.
Yeah.
I would have rather seen Sterling K. Brown do this than the role he did on The West Wing. But because I love the guy, I just think he would have been a better fit for, like, and, you know, kind of maybe coming at it as like, here I am, kind of an older man, you know, after being all through this stuff. You don't get that from the Chris Rock character. You just don't.
Yeah.
This is true. Definitely. Yeah. Well, it's been a fun conversation. I would say that, you know, if you're looking for something thematically appropriate to view this Halloween season, The Witches could certainly fit that bill. But just in case there's some other things that people might want to check out, let's transition to the plugs section of our show, where we maybe put some things on your radar you might want to scope out. And let's kick things off with Will this week. Will, what have you got for plugs?
All right. My first plug is something that you can watch on HBO Max, which is appropriate because if you've come this far in the show, you probably also watched The Witches on HBO Max, so you probably have it. The film I'm plugging is David Byrne's American Utopia. So this is a concert film. You know, it's just footage of David Byrne and 11 different musical artists from around the world. David Byrne being, of course, the former frontman of the Talking Heads. He put out a Broadway show in like 2019 called American Utopia, which was, you know, based off of that album. And it was designed to be very minimalist and really focus on the performers on stage. Well, Spike Lee directs this. He's the one that's directing this concert footage. It is absolutely top notch. I'm not a big concert footage documentary guy. It's just, it's a different experience than going to a show. I feel like I'm just watching a long music video a lot of times. I didn't feel that here. This was very timely. This was very top notch, just across the board. Looked good, sounded good. A lot of new songs that I wasn't super familiar with. Of course, they play a couple of classics, like, you know, you get Talking Heads. You know, Talking Head songs, you know, like, you know, Burning Down the House and such like that. But you also get a really wonderful closing number. He takes a Janelle Monáe protest song called Hell You Talking About, and it's basically you know, like they always say, like, you know, like, say their name when you're talking about people who are the victims of police violence or racial violence, things along those lines. Well, this is a song that is dedicated to saying the names of different African Americans who have unfortunately suffered those. And it's powerful. It kicks you in the teeth. It kicks you in the butt. I had a chance to see some of this at ACL Fest here in Austin. They play, you know, he was part of that, and we got to see him on stage, and he did some of this, but there's only a section. It was only a bit, you know, like they only had like a 45-minute set at these like festivals. You don't get to see all of it. So it was so wonderful seeing this on screen. Strongly recommend it. It will get you moving. It will move you. And it's funny. He's like in his little interstitial things, he set up songs. He's funny and insightful. So it's David Byrne's American Utopia, a collaboration between David Byrne and Spike Lee. 1,000% recommend you check it out on HBO Max.
Awesome. HBO Max, we're on a roll.
HBO to the max. What? Totally. All right. Well, thank you for that recommendation, Jim. What have you got this week?
I was flipping through stuff late last night, and I clicked on the Canopy app. And for those of you who don't know Canopy, it's an app that you can, you know, we have it on Apple TV, but it's a free service if you have a library card in cities that have libraries that are kind of attached to this network, Canopy network. And many cities and areas, libraries have this. So if you have a library card, check it out. You just go on, you sign in with your library card, and you get 10 free movies a month. And there's some great stuff hanging out on Canopy right now for free. And I came across this documentary. Of course, that's my weak spot, right? Called Remote Area Medical. And I didn't even, I just, it was it's a documentary that's about this annual 3-day like pop-up medical clinic that's organized by a nonprofit group called Remote Area Medical, or RAM. And this one was in Bristol, Tennessee, right in the center infield of the NASCAR Speedway in Bristol, Tennessee. And it was just astounding to see this thing come together. Basically, this guy, and it's not Talking Heads at all. This is very cinema verite.
Talking Heads was mine.
Ah, that's right. It
No,
was
sorry.
yours, David Byrne. This one just kind of plunks you in the middle of this 3-day thing. And it's incredible because in this section of Tennessee and the area surrounding it, there are people who are extremely disadvantaged and in serious need of medical care, dental care, vision care, just general health stuff, mammograms and chest scans. People have never seen, there are people who haven't seen a doctor since they were little kids, and they're like 40, 50, 60 years old that are coming in here. And they drive into the NASCAR Speedway, and they sit in the parking lot all week for one chance to get to see this medical staff that comes in. And all these doctors, medical professionals, all the volunteers, they all volunteer their time, and they come from all over the country to do this. It was just a really eye-opening experience. The movie, I can't say enough good things about it. It's directed by Jeff Reichert, who directed a movie last year that got a lot of acclaim called American Factory, if you remember that one.
Yes. Okay.
Yeah.
Sold.
Yeah. So this one's from 2013. It's only an hour and 20 minutes. Just fantastic. It's called Remote Area Medical. I'd check it out if you can.
Ram that one in to your
Ram
list.
it. Ram it.
Hey. Okay. Wow.
Awesome. For me this week, it is the 35th anniversary, speaking of Robert Zemeckis, of Back to the Future. And not too long ago, a few days back, the 4K Ultra HD version of the Back to the Future trilogy came out for the first time ever. It's in super high def. And as Jim alluded to actually earlier in the show, we've been watching the first couple movies. 3 is not my favorite. Haven't watched 3 yet. I may not watch 3. We'll see. Yeah. But had a hell of a great time revisiting those films. I hadn't watched them in years. I tend to pull them out very sparingly because I don't want to wear them out, emotionally. But man, every time that Williams' score kicks in, dun, 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 like, it just takes me back to being a kid, just watching with wide eyes as this DeLorean flies across the screen and disappears into the time stream. Pulls a lot from Doctor Who, pulls a lot from Star Trek, lots of, pop culture references in those films, but they're magic. And if it's been a while since you've seen them, the versions that were out before were a little bit dated. They were pretty grainy. The color was not great. And watching them in 4K was like watching them for the first time all over again. In a way, they are just beautiful. So if you're itching for it, there's a really cool collector set of the Blu-rays. It comes with a little miniature hoverboard. I bought the films digitally before I realized that set came with the little hoverboard. Now I'm thinking about buying the physical set too, keeping the hoverboard and giving the discs away. Maybe we'll do it as a prize on the show. I don't know. We'll see. But yeah, definitely go check it out if you're a BTTF fan. Oh,
That's
Jim,
awesome.
I think you're muted.
Yeah, here I am. Hey, I was watching those with you, and that first film is kind of like a masterpiece, right? I think it's considered like a touchstone for a lot of people. Just a really great romp. I think it was Hammy or somebody mentioned, or Chris mentioned, it's just a romp, which is exactly what it is.
Yeah.
But it's such a great film, holds together. It's got a lot of stuff going for it. The second one I'm a little bit less on, and the third one I don't really care about that much. But man, that first one really amps me up. It goes by like that, you know. It's probably somewhere between 90 minutes and 2 hours, and it just flies by.
No pun
Time
intended.
flies when you're
Time
in a
flies
DeLorean.
when you're in a DeLorean with a flux capacitor.
Yeah.
Right? Speaking of time flying, oh my gosh, we're at the end of our show. We're going to be coming at you again, not next week, because next week we'll either be drinking our sorrows away
Oh,
or
man.
drinking to celebrate a brand new day. I rhymed. Wow, how about that? But we'll be coming back the week after. So 2 weeks from tonight is the plan. Tonight being Tuesday, October 27th. So I don't know when that is relative to when you're listening to the show, but we'll be back that second week of November. So come on back, join us then. We'll figure out what we're going to do between now and then. But because that is a long stretch of time, gentlemen, just in case anyone wants to chat about movies or whatever, Jim, where can people find you on the interwebs?
Please find me on Twitter, where I don't do a lot of. There's a lot of political stuff on Twitter. I try to stay mostly above it, or well, that's a bad choice of words. I try to stay mostly out of it if I can. As much as is going on in my head, I try not to put it all on Twitter. But that's my Twitter handle is at JJP. Those are my initials, at JJP out west, all one word. Or you can find me on Facebook under Jim Pugliafico.
All right. Excellent. Thank you, sweetheart. Will, how about you? Where can folks connect?
Okay, there's a few places. You can check me out on Twitter. I'm at Whatever Cove. If you want to hear me talking about movies and talking about Big Brother and Survivor and reality shows, and if you want to hear me shit talking politicians, that's the place to go. You can also check me out on Facebook. Just search for William Lindis. Send me a message first so I know that you are a real person and not a bot, because there are too many of those bots circulating around right now. And
a lot of Will Lindis bots.
There are a lot of Will Lindis bots, like 87 of them. There are 2 William Lindises, so just make sure you send a picture, send one to the one with a beard. That's the me one, and not the family member one. And then the last place you can check me out is on Letterboxd. Letterboxd.com is a platform where people can rate pretty much movies and make lists about them and connect with other film fans. I've rated every movie that I've watched since 2012, which, surprise being on the show, is a lot of movies. Go search for William Lindis there. Follow me. I will follow you back.
All right. Excellent. And you can find me on Facebook as well. Just search for Brad Harris. I'm the one that likely has Chub Chaser Bear friends in common with you. Again, though, send a message first. Let me know that you're not crazy or a robot. Those would be 2 big wins in your column
Or a
for
crazy
getting
robot.
through my, or a crazy robot for getting through my filter. I love people. I want to connect with people, but like, ain't no one got time for crazy or robots or crazy robots. So be great to connect with you there. You can also find me on Twitter and Letterboxd at iBradPro. Folks, it's been great hanging out with you. Some folks are saying goodnight in the chat. Mary and Chris. So great to see you all. Thanks for joining us, Jordan. Always a pleasure. And we will see you in 2 weeks on the other side of some pretty crazy big happenings in the United States. Fingers crossed. Final thought.
Good
Bye,
luck
everybody.
and stay safe, everyone. Bye.
Yeah.
We love you all. Ending on a happy note.
Yay!